Standing in front of my bedroom mirror, adjusting the delicate lace on my wedding dress, I could not help but think about how different this morning felt from every other milestone in my 29 years. The soft morning light streaming through my apartment window caught the silk fabric perfectly, making it shimmer like something out of a fairy tale. For once in my life, this day was truly mine. No one could overshadow it, no one could steal the spotlight, and no one could make me feel like the forgotten daughter. But getting to this moment had taken a lifetime of being second best to my golden child sister Stella. Before we dive into this story, I would love to know where you are watching from. Please hit that like button if you are ready for a wedding day, revenge story that will leave you speechless, and do not forget to subscribe for more real family drama. Trust me, you will want to stick around because this wedding day held more surprises than anyone expected, and the sweet revenge I had been planning was about to unfold in ways my family never saw coming. Growing up in suburban Ohio, I always knew there was something different about how my parents treated me compared to my younger sister Stella. We were born just 3 years apart, but you would think we came from completely different families based on the way our parents responded to us. Stella had inherited our mother, Linda's gorgeous blonde hair and bright blue eyes, while I got our father Robert's more modest brown hair and brown eyes. But the physical differences were nothing compared to the emotional ones that started showing up early in our childhood. When I was 8 years old, I brought home a math test with a perfect score and a big red A+ written across the top. I was so proud, rushing through the front door to show my parents my achievement. Dad glanced at it briefly and said, "Good job, Harper," before returning to his newspaper. Mom smiled and patted my head, telling me to put it on the refrigerator. But just 2 weeks later, when 5-year-old Stella drew a picture of what could generously be called a cat with crayons, both of my parents erupted in excitement. They called my grandparents, my aunts and uncles, and even some of their friends to tell everyone about Stella's amazing artistic talent. That drawing went into a special frame on the living room mantel, while my perfect math test got buried under grocery store coupons on the fridge. The pattern continued with our birthday parties. Every year, Stella got elaborate themed celebrations that seemed to grow more extravagant as she got older. When she turned 7, my parents rented a bounce house and hired a princess to come perform at our house. The backyard was decorated with pink streamers, balloons, and a custom castle backdrop for photos. My birthday parties, on the other hand, were simple affairs in our backyard with store-bought cake and basic decorations from the dollar store. I told myself it did not matter, that I was just happy to have a party at all, but deep down I started to wonder why my special day never seemed quite as special. Christmas morning became another reminder of my place in the family hierarchy. Stella would wake up to find elaborate American Girl doll sets, expensive art supplies, and trendy clothes that she had circled in catalogs. Her pile of presents always seemed to tower over mine, filled with the latest toys and gadgets that all her friends had. Meanwhile, I would unwrap coloring books, basic craft sets, and practical items like socks and pajamas. My parents would explain that they tried to be thoughtful with my gifts, choosing things that would help me learn and grow. I appreciated their intentions, but I could not help noticing that Stella's gifts seemed designed purely to make her happy, while mine always came with some kind of educational purpose attached. As we moved into middle school and high school, the differences in treatment became even more pronounced and harder to ignore. I threw myself into academics and extracurricular activities, desperate to find some way to earn the kind of attention and pride that seemed to come naturally to Stella. I joined the debate team, ran for student council, and spent countless hours studying to maintain perfect grades. When I was named valedictorian of my senior class and received a full academic scholarship to our state university, I thought surely this would be the moment my parents would finally see my worth. The graduation ceremony was a perfect example of how differently they treated our achievements. My parents attended, of course, but they sat in the middle section rather than trying to get good seats up front. They took a few obligatory photos of me in my cap and gown, but spent most of the reception talking to other parents about their vacation plans. There was no celebration dinner, no social media posts announcing my accomplishment, and no phone calls to relatives sharing the good news. Compare that to just 2 years later, when Stella made the varsity cheerleading squad as a sophomore. Mom took the entire day off work to go shopping for celebration supplies. She posted no fewer than 50 photos on Facebook, wrote a lengthy caption about how proud she was of Stella's dedication and school spirit, and threw an impromptu dinner party that weekend. Dad grilled steaks, Mom made Stella's favorite dessert, and they invited half the neighborhood to come congratulate her. The achievement was impressive for a sophomore, but it was hardly the academic milestone that a full scholarship represented. I remember one particularly painful incident during my senior year when I won the regional debate championship. I had been working toward this goal for 3 years, spending every weekend traveling to tournaments and every evening practicing my arguments. When I called home from the competition site, practically vibrating with excitement, Mom answered the phone, distracted and hurried. She was apparently helping Stella pick out a dress for homecoming and kept cutting me off to give Stella advice about colors and styles. After I managed to blurt out my news, Mom said, "That is wonderful, honey," in the same tone she might use to acknowledge that I had remembered to take out the trash. She then immediately returned to the dress conversation, never asking for details about the competition or how I was feeling about my victory. During my high school years, I started working part-time jobs to save money for college expenses that I knew my parents would not cover. While Stella spent her weekends shopping with friends or attending social events, I was bagging groceries or tutoring younger students. I told myself this was making me more independent and responsible, which was probably true, but I also could not help noticing that Stella never had to worry about money for college applications, prom dresses, or senior year activities. Everything was simply provided for her without question. College brought a whole new level of disparity that was harder to dismiss or rationalize. I had chosen to attend our state university primarily because of the financial aid package, but I still needed to work multiple jobs to cover my living expenses and textbooks. I waited tables on weekends, worked in the campus library between classes, and spent summers doing internships that paid very little but looked good on my resume. Despite the packed schedule, I managed to maintain a high grade point average and made the dean's list every semester. My parents provided minimal financial support during these years, sending the occasional $50 check with a note saying they hoped I was doing well. When I called home to share academic achievements or talk about internship opportunities, the conversations were brief and felt more like obligation than genuine interest. Mom would ask basic questions about my classes and then quickly shift the conversation to whatever was happening with Stella. Meanwhile, Stella had chosen an expensive private college 3 hours away to study fashion merchandising. My parents not only paid her full tuition without complaint, but also covered her housing meal plan, textbooks, and a generous monthly allowance for entertainment and shopping. They visited her campus, regularly attended parent weekends, and proudly displayed her college decals on both of their cars. When I mentioned that I had never seen them wear any clothing or accessories from my university, Dad looked genuinely surprised, as if it had never occurred to him to show that kind of public support for my education. The breaking point came during my junior year when I landed a competitive internship at a Fortune 500 company in Chicago. This was a huge opportunity that could potentially lead to a full-time job offer after graduation, and I was incredibly excited to share the news. When I called home that evening, practically bursting with pride, Mom answered the phone, but immediately put me on hold because Stella was having a crisis about which sorority she wanted to rush. After 10 minutes of listening to muffled conversations in the background, Mom returned to the phone and asked me to make it quick because they were helping Stella prepare for rush week. I shared my internship news in about 30 seconds, and Mom responded with a distracted, "That sounds great, honey. We are so proud of you." But then she immediately had to go because Stella needed help picking out outfits for the various rush events. What hurt most was that my parents never followed up to ask how the internship went, what I learned, or whether it might lead to future opportunities. It was as if I had never mentioned it at all. That phone call made me realize something that I had been trying to avoid acknowledging for years. My parents had unconsciously decided that I was the strong, independent daughter who would figure things out on her own, while Stella was the delicate social daughter who needed constant support and guidance. They seemed to interpret my academic success and self-reliance as evidence that I did not need their attention or encouragement, while Stella's more social focus and occasional struggles were seen as reasons to provide extra help and celebration. I started paying closer attention to how they talked about us to other people, and the pattern became impossible to ignore. When relatives asked about their daughters, they would spend 10 minutes describing Stella's latest adventures, friendships, and achievements, always with an underlying tone of pride and amusement. When they got around to mentioning me, it was usually something brief, like, "Harper is doing really well in school," before quickly moving on to other topics. They seemed to view my accomplishments as expected and unremarkable, while Stella's were seen as delightful surprises worth celebrating. I channeled my hurt and frustration into even greater determination to succeed. I networked aggressively, took on leadership roles in student organizations, and graduated summa cum laude with job offers from multiple companies. But even those achievements felt hollow when I realized my parents viewed them as just more evidence that I was the daughter who did not need their emotional support. The one family member who seemed to notice the inequality was my father's mother, Grandma Rose. She had always treated Stella and me exactly the same, remembering our birthdays with equally thoughtful gifts and showing genuine interest in both of our lives. During my senior year of college, she made a special trip to visit my apartment, something she had never done before. We sat in my tiny living room drinking coffee, and Grandma Rose studied my face carefully before speaking. "Harper, I need to tell you something that I have been thinking about for a long time. Your parents love you very much, but they have made a mistake that I think is hurting you." She went on to explain that she believed my parents thought providing extra support for Stella was a way of showing love, but they did not understand that they were accidentally punishing me for being capable and independent. "They worry that Stella will not make it in the world without help," Grandma Rose said gently, "but they assume you will be fine no matter what. They do not see that you need encouragement and recognition just as much as she does, maybe more so, because you work twice as hard for half the attention." It was the first time anyone in my family had acknowledged what I had been experiencing, and I found myself crying harder than I had in years. Grandma Rose held my hands and told me she was proud of the woman I had become, that my strength and determination reminded her of herself at my age. She promised that she saw everything, understood the unfairness, and wanted me to know that my achievements mattered deeply to her, even if my parents struggled to show appropriate appreciation. That conversation planted a seed of something I had never allowed myself to feel before: righteous anger about the way I had been treated. After college, I landed an excellent position at a marketing firm in Chicago and moved into my own apartment downtown. For the first time in my life, I felt completely independent and proud of what I had accomplished entirely on my own. The job was challenging and rewarding, and within 18 months, I had earned a promotion to senior analyst with a significant salary increase. When I called to share this news with my parents, Dad said, "That is nice, honey," and Mom added, "We always knew you would do well," before the conversation moved on to other topics. Around the same time, Stella was struggling to find stable employment after graduating with her fashion merchandising degree. She had moved back home and was working part-time at a local boutique, earning barely above minimum wage and complaining constantly about how boring the job was. When she finally got promoted to assistant manager after 6 months, my parents threw a dinner party to celebrate. Mom posted a long Facebook status about how proud she was of Stella for finding her passion and building her career. The contrast was so stark that I actually screenshot the post and stared at it for 20 minutes, trying to understand how assistant manager at a small town boutique warranted more celebration than senior analyst at a major corporation. The financial disparity became even more obvious once we were both adults. My parents helped Stella with car payments, insurance, frequent shopping sprees, and various other expenses whenever she asked. They never offered me any financial assistance, and I never asked, but it stung to watch them cheerfully support her lifestyle, while I budgeted carefully to afford my own necessities. When Stella wanted to take a vacation to Florida with friends but could not afford it, they covered the entire cost and told her to have fun and make memories. When I mentioned that I was saving up for a weekend trip to visit college friends, they did not offer to help or even ask about my plans. My romantic relationships received very different treatment as well. When I started dating Jake, a wonderful man I met through work who came from a working-class family, my parents were polite but clearly unimpressed. Mom made subtle comments about his simple background, and Dad never bothered to ask about his career goals or interests. When they met Jake's parents, who were genuinely kind people, Mom later described them as nice enough, in a tone that suggested she found them boring. Meanwhile, every boyfriend Stella brought home was welcomed with open arms, regardless of his employment status, education level, or long-term prospects. Mom would plan elaborate dinners. When Stella had a new relationship, Dad would offer to help with car troubles or job connections, and they would both spend considerable time and energy getting to know these young men. The message was clear: Stella's happiness in relationships was worth investing in, while my relationship was expected to succeed or fail on its own merits. One evening when I was visiting for Sunday dinner, I overheard Mom talking to my aunt in the kitchen. "Harper has always been so independent," she was saying, "but Stella really needs more guidance and support. Harper will be fine no matter what, but we worry about Stella making good choices." The comment crystallized something I had been feeling, but could not articulate. My parents had decided that my competence meant I did not need love and attention, while Stella's struggles meant she deserved extra care. They had confused capability with invulnerability, and I was paying the emotional price for their misconceptions. When Grandma Rose came to visit my apartment a few months later, she took one look at my face and knew something was bothering me. I found myself telling her about the overheard conversation, the financial inequities, and the relationship disparities. She listened quietly, nodding occasionally, and asking thoughtful questions about specific incidents. Your parents have convinced themselves that treating you differently is somehow fair, she said finally, but they are wrong. Love is not a finite resource that has to be rationed based on who seems to need it most. Every child deserves to feel valued and celebrated, regardless of how capable they appear to be. She went on to tell me that she had been watching this dynamic for years and had tried to compensate by giving me extra attention and encouragement whenever possible. I want you to know that I have been setting money aside specifically for you, Grandma Rose said, reaching into her purse to pull out a savings account statement. I have been saving for years because I knew your parents would not provide the same support for your major life events that they give Stella. This money is yours, and I want you to use it for something that brings you joy. The account had over $25,000 in it, money she had been quietly accumulating through her Social Security checks and small investments. I started crying again, overwhelmed by her generosity and the validation of my experiences. Grandma Rose was the only family member who seemed to understand that being strong did not mean I did not need support, and that my accomplishments deserved recognition, even if they came easily to me. Her gift felt like more than money. It felt like proof that my worth was not determined by how much help I needed. That conversation marked the beginning of a shift in how I viewed my family relationships. Instead of trying harder to earn my parents' attention and approval, I started setting boundaries and managing my expectations. I realized that their treatment of me said more about their limitations than about my value as a daughter and person. 2 years later, Jake proposed during a romantic weekend getaway to a cabin in Michigan. He had planned everything perfectly, proposing during a sunset walk along the lakeshore with a ring he had been secretly saving for months. I called my parents immediately afterward, practically glowing with excitement and eager to share our happy news. "Congratulations, Harper," Mom said with what sounded like genuine warmth. "We are so happy for you both. When are you thinking about having the wedding?" When I told them we were hoping for a spring ceremony, they offered to contribute some money toward the costs. "We want to help however we can," Dad added. "Maybe we can cover $3,000 or $4,000 to get you started." I was touched by their offer and grateful for any support, even though I knew Jake and I would be paying for most of the wedding ourselves. 2 weeks later, Stella called with her own engagement news. She had been dating Marcus, an unemployed musician with no clear career prospects, for about 8 months when he proposed with a ring I suspected my parents had helped him purchase. The contrast in my parents' responses was immediate and dramatic. Mom took an entire week off work to start planning Stella's wedding, creating Pinterest boards, and scheduling appointments with venues before Stella had even set a date. Within days, my parents announced they would be paying for Stella's entire wedding with a budget of $20,000. Mom posted professional engagement photos on Facebook that she had arranged and paid for, along with a lengthy caption about how thrilled she was to be gaining such a wonderful son-in-law. She immediately began planning an elaborate bridal shower and started researching caterers and florists for the big day. The inequality was staggering, but what happened next pushed me beyond my breaking point. Jake and I had booked a beautiful country club for our spring wedding, choosing a date in late April that felt perfect for the outdoor ceremony we wanted. The venue was modest but elegant, and we were excited about celebrating our marriage in such a lovely setting. About a month after we had signed our contract and put down a deposit, Stella announced that she also wanted a spring wedding at a similar venue. She had apparently driven past our country club and decided it was exactly what she wanted for her own celebration. When Mom called me a few days later, I could hear the awkwardness in her voice before she even started speaking. "Harper, honey, I need to ask you something that might be a little difficult," she began. "Stella has really fallen in love with the idea of a spring wedding, and she was wondering if you might consider changing your date to summer or fall instead." She went on to explain that Stella had always dreamed of an April wedding, and that it would mean so much to her to have the spring celebration she had been imagining since childhood. I was speechless. After 29 years of accommodating Stella's preferences and accepting less attention and support, my parents were asking me to change my own wedding date so that my sister could have the season she wanted. "Mom, we have already signed a contract and put down a deposit," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We have sent save-the-date cards, and people have made travel arrangements." "I know it is complicated," Mom replied, "but maybe the venue would be willing to work with you if you explain the situation. Family is so important, and it would really mean a lot to Stella if she could have her dream wedding." The conversation ended with me promising to think about it, but I was already planning something else entirely. That night, I called Grandma Rose and told her about the phone conversation. She was quiet for a long moment before responding with more anger than I had ever heard in her voice. "That is absolutely unacceptable," she said firmly. "Your wedding day should be exactly what you and Jake want, and no one should be asking you to compromise your plans for someone else's preferences." We talked for over an hour about the years of inequality, the pattern of favoritism, and the way my parents seemed to view my needs as less important than Stella's wants. "I think it is time to make a statement," Grandma Rose said finally. "I have been watching this unfairness for too many years, and your wedding day should be the moment when you finally get the recognition and celebration you deserve." She told me about her savings account again and suggested that we use some of that money to make my wedding day truly special in a way that would send a clear message to my family. "I want everyone to see how proud I am of you," she said, "and I want your parents to understand what they have been missing all these years." We spent the next hour planning exactly how to make that happen. The week before my wedding, my parents hosted a pre-wedding family dinner at their house. Extended relatives had come into town, and the evening was supposed to be a celebration of Jake and me as we prepared for our big day. The dinner was pleasant enough with good food and warm conversation, but what happened during dessert changed everything. Mom stood up to make a speech, which I assumed would be about Jake and me and our upcoming marriage. Instead, she announced that she and Dad had decided to give Stella an additional $10,000 for her honeymoon as an early wedding gift. "We want Marcus and Stella to have the most romantic trip possible," she said, beaming at my sister across the table. "They have been looking at trips to Italy, and we want to make sure they can afford the dream vacation they deserve." The room erupted in congratulations for Stella, who stood up to hug our parents while everyone applauded. I sat frozen in my chair, staring at the scene and trying to process what had just happened. At my own pre-wedding dinner, my parents had chosen to announce a generous gift for my sister's future honeymoon, while Jake and I had received no such consideration. "What about Harper and Jake's honeymoon?" my cousin asked innocently clearly, not understanding the family dynamics at play. All eyes turned to my parents, who looked genuinely surprised by the question. "Well, Harper and Jake are so practical and responsible," Mom replied with a nervous laugh. "I am sure they will figure out something wonderful within their budget. They are both so good at planning and saving money." The response felt like a slap across the face, reducing my marriage and future happiness to a matter of practicality, while Stella's relationship warranted romantic gestures and financial generosity. But what truly broke my heart was the expression on Stella's face. She was smirking slightly, clearly, enjoying the attention and the way the conversation had shifted away from my wedding and toward her upcoming marriage. Later that evening, she admitted to me that she had known about the honeymoon money for weeks and had been looking forward to the announcement all night. That was the moment I decided to implement the plan that Grandma Rose and I had discussed. I was done being the forgotten daughter, done accepting less recognition and support, and done pretending that the inequality did not matter. My wedding day was going to be different, and my family was about to learn some hard truths about favoritism and its consequences. My wedding morning dawned bright and beautiful, with perfect spring weather and a sense of excitement that I had not felt in years. Instead of the usual anxiety about whether my parents would show appropriate enthusiasm for my big day, I felt calm and confident, knowing that I had a plan to finally claim the recognition I deserved. Grandma Rose arrived at my apartment early to help me get ready, bringing with her a special surprise that we had arranged weeks earlier. She had hired a professional photographer to document every moment of my preparation and ceremony, ensuring that my wedding would be captured with the same care and attention that Stella's engagement had received. "Today is about celebrating you," she said as she helped me into my dress, "and I want every beautiful moment preserved forever." The ceremony itself was everything Jake and I had dreamed of. We exchanged heartfelt vows that brought tears to our eyes and laughter from our guests. The country club grounds were gorgeous with blooming flowers, providing a perfect backdrop for our celebration of love and commitment. For the first time in my adult life, I felt completely confident that I was the center of positive attention from my family and friends. As the reception began, my parents gave a brief speech about how happy they were to see both of their daughters finding love and building their own families. Their words were kind, but felt somewhat generic, lacking the specific enthusiasm and pride they had shown for Stella's engagement. I smiled graciously and thanked them for their support, knowing that the evening was far from over. After dinner and the traditional toasts, I stood up to give my own speech. The room quieted as I began to thank everyone for celebrating this special day with Jake and me. I talked about how meaningful it was to be surrounded by family and friends who had supported our relationship and believed in our future together. I want to share something that makes this day extra special for me. I continued smiling at Grandma Rose across the room. My grandmother has given Jake and me the most incredible wedding gift that I want to acknowledge publicly. I paused for effect, noticing that Stella had stopped eating her cake and was paying close attention to my words. Grandma Rose has gifted us $25,000 for our dream honeymoon to Europe. I announced, watching as audible gasps rippled through the room. She told me that she wanted to invest in the granddaughter who never asked for anything but always worked hard for everything she achieved. The room erupted in applause and congratulations, with guests turning to beam at Grandma Rose and then back at Jake and me. I could see Stella's face had gone pale, and my parents looked genuinely shocked by the announcement. But I was not finished yet. "This gift means more to me than just the trip itself," I continued. "It represents having someone in my family who sees my worth and wants to celebrate my happiness with the same enthusiasm that every bride deserves. Grandma Rose, thank you for believing in me and for showing me what unconditional family support looks like." The response from our wedding guests was overwhelming. People approached us throughout the evening to congratulate us on the generous gift and to tell us how excited they were for our European adventure. Several relatives mentioned how wonderful it was to see a grandmother supporting her granddaughter's dreams, and many people asked Grandma Rose about her own travel experiences and advice for our trip. My parents approached me later in the evening, clearly uncomfortable and unsure how to respond to what had just happened. "Harper, we had no idea that Grandma Rose was planning such a generous gift," Mom said carefully. "We would have helped more with your honeymoon if we had known you needed assistance." "Mom, I never expected help," I replied calmly, "but I also never expected the inequality that I have experienced my entire life." Tonight was not about making anyone feel bad. It was about finally having someone recognize my worth and celebrate my happiness with genuine enthusiasm. Dad looked surprised, as if he was hearing about the disparity for the first time. "What inequality?" he asked, seeming genuinely confused. I realized that my parents had been so focused on providing what they saw as necessary support for Stella that they had never noticed how differently they treated my achievements and milestones. The conversation that followed was difficult but necessary, with me calmly explaining years of examples while they listened with growing understanding and regret. Stella's reaction was perhaps the most interesting part of the evening. Instead of trying to create drama or steal attention, as I might have expected, she seemed to fade into the background for the first time in years. The spotlight was finally on me for all the right reasons, and there was nothing she could do to diminish that. Several guests commented to me later about how radiant and happy I looked, and how wonderful it was to see me getting the recognition I deserved. The aftermath of that evening was profound and lasting. Jake and I spent 3 magical weeks in Europe, visiting countries I had only dreamed of seeing and creating memories that will last a lifetime. But more importantly, the trip represented a shift in how I viewed myself and my place in my family. During our time abroad, I had space to process years of hurt and resentment, and I realized that my wedding day revenge had not been about hurting my family. It had been about finally loving myself enough to demand better treatment and recognition. The inequality I had experienced was real and damaging, but allowing it to continue indefinitely would only perpetuate the cycle. When Jake and I returned home, my parents made awkward but genuine attempts to balance their attention between Stella and me. They started asking more detailed questions about my work and interests, remembering to celebrate my achievements, and including me more prominently in family conversations and social media posts. The changes were not perfect, but they represented a sincere effort to address years of unconscious favoritism. Perhaps most surprisingly, Stella herself began acknowledging the privileges she had received and made genuine attempts to build a better relationship with me. She admitted that she had always known about the different treatment, but had been afraid to speak up because she enjoyed the extra attention. Our relationship today is stronger than it has ever been built on honesty rather than competition. Grandma Rose's wisdom proved prophetic. Sometimes people need to see inequality clearly before they can change. My wedding day statement was not about revenge in the vindictive sense, but about creating a moment of clarity that forced my family to confront their unconscious biases and make positive changes. The most important lesson I learned through this experience was that self-advocacy is not selfish. For too many years, I had accepted less recognition and support because I did not want to cause conflict or seem demanding. But staying silent about inequality only allows it to continue and escalate. Sometimes the people who love us need clear examples of how their behavior affects us before they can make necessary changes. Today, When I think about my wedding day and the courage it took to finally demand better treatment, I feel proud of the woman I became in that moment. The best revenge was not hurting anyone, but finally loving myself enough to insist on the respect and recognition that every daughter deserves. True family means supporting everyone's success, not just the person who seems to need the most help. I hope my story encourages you to examine your own family dynamics and speak up if you are experiencing similar inequality. Have you ever felt like the forgotten child in your family? Or have you witnessed favoritism that affected someone you love? Please share your experiences in the comments below, because these conversations help all of us heal and grow. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real family stories that tackle difficult but important topics. Share this video with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the power of self-advocacy and the importance of demanding equal treatment within families. Thank you for listening to my story and for being part of a community that believes every person deserves to feel valued and celebrated. I wish you all the courage to speak your truth and the wisdom to build relationships based on mutual respect and genuine love.